Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. We have little time for domestic stuff, even though in the background behind all this Egyptian stuff in the foreground, the Republican reactionaries are preparing their plans for a government shutdown and or default by the United States government. They say they want to starve the beast. The beast happens to be your health care, your unemployment benefits, your Social Security, your Medicare. That's the beast they propose to starve. Wall Street gets paid off with bailouts, corporate welfare, $3.3 trillion from the Fed, and the Republican Party with their new Tea Party fanatic reactionary wing coming in there to attack you. And that, I think, was going to clear the minds of a lot of people when this free market stuff ceases to be simply a slogan and then becomes a direct attack on your health, welfare, and even life. If the Republicans go all the way on either of these, the government shutdown or even more the default, because the default would bring a worldwide panic. Even Bernanke, right? Bernanke is right. It would bring a worldwide panic. The corporate leaders of the Republican Party, the various Boehners and McConnells, have said, well, we just want to use this as leverage. We don't really want to have a government shutdown. But this is, of course, catastrophic brinksmanship, and they want $38 billion of cuts. This will cost human lives, boys, and there's a word for that at Nuremberg, and there are prescribed responses for people who do this kind of stuff. Anyway, the main point is that if this kind of austerity gouging, cut and gut policy goes on, you will have riots in the United States this summer, 2011, long hot summer in the cities and elsewhere. Hunger riots in the United States. Then we'll see where the media stand, right? Whether everybody who demonstrates is a hero of democracy. It probably won't be over here. You'll be more like a Greek who burned down the bank. But for the moment in Egypt, they're heroes of democracy. Obviously, the imperialist front is split. That's another important feature. The U.S. and the British immediately trumpeting Mubarak out now. The Israelis say, no, please, we want to keep him, because they realize that this Muslim Brotherhood government that the U.S. now seems to want, the Ikhwan regime, would be strongly anti-Israeli, and this would make their situation virtually untenable. I think some people would think that's a good thing. I think that's a guarantee for World War III. So I think the status quo in that case is significantly better from any conceivable point of view. Right? People who want apocalyptic confrontations are essentially courting the end of the world, especially with the world system being as weakened as it is now by the current depression. The other group that wants Mubarak to stay is the Copts, the Coptic Christians. It's about 10% of the population. So 7 or 8 or 9 million Coptic Christians are very much afraid of what happens if Mubarak, who tolerates them, they don't like him, but he tolerates them. If Mubarak is out and the Ikhwan Muslim Brotherhood comes in, what is their fate going to be? These are some interesting questions. But right now, the imperialist front is split, with the Israelis going one way. Even the neocons, I think, are split. Some neocons are going with their Israeli friends. Other neocons are going with the U.S. foreign policy establishment. It shows, by the way, that the Israelis don't control the world system, that they don't get what they want, and that they're ultimately a smaller part of the imperialist coalition than many people seem to think. And remember, for Samuel Huntington in his famous Clash of Civilization scenario, Israel is expendable. So all of that interesting to factor in. That split, by the way, is one of the things that keeps Mubarak going. He would need international support. You would remember that when Ahmadinejad was targeted by a color revolution in June of 2009, he was able to go immediately to the Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting and get support, in addition to releasing his Basij onto the streets to have this counterstroke. In the case of Mubarak, he does not seem to have looked around enough to prepare international fallback options, although Putin called him yesterday. Maybe something is beginning to move. Finally, the effect of all this on the youth generation around the world, we're now talking the millennials, right, born after 1982, 1983, right, after the Xers, after that lost generation, come the millennials, and I'm afraid in many ways they begin equally, or in slightly different ways, but also to look like a lost generation, right? 2 in a row. That's not so good. But let's look at some commentaries here. Let's take this guy, Andrew Gavin Marshall of the Center for Research on Globalization up there in Canada. And this is then repeated by Paul Joseph Watson on InfoWars. They seem to think that Zbigniew Brzezinski is afraid of the worldwide political awakening. And I would say no, that's the whole point, is that Zbigniew Brzezinski he regards the worldwide political awakening as a given, and he wants to use it for his own purposes, and so far he's winning. The whole Obama election campaign was an exercise in a postmodern coup using the youth bulge here in the U.S., such as it is, to project the Wall Street puppet Obama into power. In Egypt, that would be Baradei. And then what comes after Baradei, right? The Muslim Brotherhood would be something like the reactionary Republicans here. To get into that kind of a spiral, you could call it a Weimar death spiral. Anyway, Zbigniew Brzezinski is not he's not afraid of the so-called political awakening. Plus, remember, he's talking about, I think he says, 80 to 120 million people around the world in the poorer countries who are now college educated. Is this the world revolution that some people have hoped for? And I would say, if you want to have it could be, but here's what you need. If you want to have a revolution, you've got to have one or two things, preferably both. You must have a program. What are the main problems of the society? How do you propose to solve them? Not down with Mubarak, not freedom, not I don't like hierarchy, not transparency, none of that stuff, but detailed programs. What are you going to do about speculation? What's with the central bank? What's your industrial policy? What's your labor policy? What's your policy on social welfare expenditures? What's your policy on the social safety net? On and on. You've got to have detailed, practical answers to all of that. Not theory, but the actual program. You need program. You need program and programs. They don't have it. And then there's a question of organization. If you don't have an organization, well, Atpor, or April 6th movement from the CIA, they're an organization. The Muslim Brotherhood is an organization. The Army is an organization. What organization do you have? One of the results of the flickering screen era, be it television, the movies, the internet, the computer, the iPhone, whatever it is, all these flickering screens, people are more and more isolated, atomized, fragmented, autistic in their thinking, verging on lobotomized, zombified when we get to specimens like Assange. No organization. So that means if you go into a revolutionary upsurge with no program and no organization, you're in bad shape. Some examples, right? The French Revolution is an example of a very oppressive situation that was identified, and there were programs of reform. The British were able to come in with the people working with Bentham, that is to say Robespierre and Saint-Just, and they were able to hijack the revolutionary moment, if you like, and turn that into the monstrous Rousseauvian excesses of the French Revolution. It was done by the British through a free trade zone, right? There's always an economic warfare aspect to these things. 1848, after the Metternich system of Russia, Prussia, and Austria had been oppressing much of continental Europe with the Holy Alliance, right? The Council of Vienna system. It was clear there was going to be some kind of explosion. The British were there with their people. Mazzini was there. So 1968, the same thing, right? There was a real reason for it, but the CIA was there with their fake leaders. Cohn-Bendit is in the European Parliament today, and so on and so forth. So I would have to say to the people who are caught up in the enthusiasm of the moment, revolutionary change is possible, but you need a program and you need an organization. And I'm not talking about apostolic successions, and indeed I'm not even talking about the ultra-left area, but competent answers to the main problems of society are the first thing you need if you want to exercise authority. So get to work on the program, get to work on some form of organization. And we'll see you next week here on World Crisis Radio. Keep in touch on Twitter, Webster G. Tarpley on Twitter.